Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's BU Professional Development Webinar, Insider's Perspective, Career Transition Advice from a Recruiter. My name is Jeff Murphy, and I'm an Associate Director in the BU Alumni Relations Office, as well as a proud alumnus of the BU Questrom School of Business. Today's webinar is sponsored by Boston University Alumni Relations and is offered as part of BU Alumni Career Weeks 2017. BU has dedicated the entire month of March to alumni careers with 31 days of networking events, professional development webinars, and panels, both online and in 14 cities around the world. Whether you're a seasoned professional looking for a change, new to the job market, or just need advice to apply to your career, there's likely something for you. See the full schedule of events on our website at bu.edu/alumni/careerweeks. It's important that we get your opinion on how we're doing, so we very much look forward to receiving your feedback via a survey that will be emailed to you soon. Today, I know we have alumni joining us from faraway places like Ontario, Madrid, London, Rome, Mongolia, Hermosa Beach, California, Tampa, Florida, Andover, Kansas, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and as always, dozens of Massachusetts alumni from towns like Marshfield, Shrewsbury, Hyde Park, Stoneham, Natick, and more. For each and every one of you out there, please know that we really do value your opinion on this and every program that we offer. Before I introduce today's speaker, some brief housekeeping notes. As you know by now, this webinar is being hosted on the Adobe Connect online meeting platform. If you experience any trouble with the audio or visual portions of today's presentation, I'll ask that you please contact Adobe Connect directly. If you want to jot down this phone number, you can reach them at 1-800-422-3623. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be made available for on-demand viewing on the Alumni Association website, again found at bu.edu/alumni. Our speaker today is very eager to answer any questions you may have, and you're welcome to submit them throughout the presentation using the Q&A chat box that you should see at the bottom of your screen. We hope to get to as many questions as we can during today's webinar. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the day. Presenting from a very snowy Somerville, Massachusetts is Questrom School of Business MBA alumna Molly Richter. Molly joined the Partners Healthcare Development Office in April 2016 as the Senior Development Officer of Staff Development. In this role, she recruits talent to the fundraising offices of the country's top academic medicine institutions, including Massachusetts General Hospital and Brigham and Women's Hospital. Becoming a recruiter at Partners was a career change for Molly after spending almost 10 years as a fundraiser. Prior to joining Partners, Molly was a director of development at William James College. Molly holds an MBA in public and nonprofit management from BU, as well as a BA in economics from New York University. She currently serves on the board of directors for the Center of Teen Empowerment, a youth organizing and social change nonprofit based in Boston. Molly, thanks so much for being here today. I really appreciate your time and the fact that you're doing this for our alumni community. I'm going to go ahead and get your slide deck up and running, and then the floor is all yours. And again, it might just be a second or two before you see the slides come up on your end.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. So as Jeff mentioned, I work for Partners Healthcare, and those of you in the greater Boston area might be familiar with our organization. Those of you who aren't, we are a $25 billion not-for-profit organization. Yes, that was billion with a B. And we are the parent company of Massachusetts General Hospital and Brigham and Women's Hospital, two of the leading academic medical institutions in the world, which are both teaching affiliates of Harvard Medical School. This slide shows you all the brands that fall under Partners Healthcare. We are hospitals, physicians organizations, we have our own insurance company, and even our own graduate school. So collectively, these brands represent over 65,000 employees, which makes Partners the largest private employer in the state of Massachusetts. So here's how I fit into the equation. As Jeff mentioned, I am a recruiter focused on the development, as in fundraising offices for each affiliate hospital. We have 13 development offices with a total of over 370 staff. And on average per month, I have 20 open recs. So here is our agenda for the day. I'm going to give you some best practices around resumes and cover letters. We're going to talk about how to use LinkedIn. And then I'm going to give you some tips for how to best utilize and develop your network and some best practices around interviews. And we're going to talk about various kinds of interviews, including informational, phone screens, and in-person interviews. So first, how to defeat the robots. If you've applied to a job recently, chances are you had to submit an application online. So those platforms are called applicant tracking systems. And the first thing that happens is your resume is run through an algorithm that determines whether you meet the minimum qualifications for a job. But these systems are not perfect. So you need to make sure that your resume matches the language of the company in order to avoid being erroneously rejected. One way to do this, and I can't take credit for this idea, it was actually something that came up on a panel I attended, was to upload the job description into a word cloud generator. If you're not familiar with word clouds, they demonstrate which words are used most often in a piece of text by the size of the word in the image. And I'm going to show you an example on the next slide. So what you would do then is take the words that show up largest in the word cloud and use them in your resume. I'm not, people can get tricky about this. I've heard about people putting text in white font. That's not what I'm saying. I think of this more like how the Eskimos have 50 different words for snow, which is an appropriate reference given the blizzard that I'm watching out my window right now. Uh, you want to make sure that you're using the word for snow that the company's using, if you understand what I mean. But also scan the job description, see if there's anything else in there that really stands out. And you just want to make sure you're using the language of the company. But it is always best to follow up with a human. And this is where your network comes into play. And we're going to talk about that more in a minute. So here's an example of a word cloud. I use this based on a database manager position we currently have open at Spalding Rehabilitation Network. And I put it into the form of a cat just to amuse myself. And you can see, data system shows up really large, so that's definitely something you'd want to utilize in your resume in an authentic way. I did also want to point out that you can look at the top of the cat where development is in a capital D, and in the uh, right underneath the word systems, you can see it has a lowercase d. So just be aware that they do think of things with capital letters as different words from things with lowercase letters. So moving on, your resumes. Accuracy is critical. There was a Deloitte did research using predictive analytics to determine which factors were most closely associated with employee turnover within a year. And the highest correlation with employee turnover was the quality of the resume. This is something that recruiters know, and it's something they take seriously. Sit with people, hiring managers, and other talent management partners that I work with, and they'll literally have a red pen out and be going through resumes and cover letters looking for typos and grammatical errors. So it is something to take very seriously. I think of it as your resume and your cover letter are examples of the quality of work that you would do if you were chosen to do a job. So you obviously want to present your best work. In terms of formatting, my opinion is that reverse chronological is best. This means your most recent job is shows up at the top and you work backward from there. Um, I know some people say if you're changing industries, you might want to highlight accomplishments versus responsibilities you had in specific roles. I think this can get a little bit confusing, and I'm going to show you some examples on the next two slides about why I feel that way. The layout in general should be really clean and professional, but don't oversimplify it. I do think that if you're going for a creative role, that's definitely appropriate to get a bit more creative with your resume. But in general, the goal is just I need to be able to understand it because I have to go to the hiring manager and advocate for you. If I can't understand your experience, then I don't know how I'm going to pitch it to a hiring manager. So let me show you some examples. This one would be an example of what I think a good resume should look like. It's reverse chronological. I can understand their experience and the accomplishments that they did within each specific role. And there's still room at the top to highlight some of those transferable skills or some of those accomplishments that you might want to call out, especially if you're looking to change industries. This one I think is really confusing. They list all of their accomplishments at the top, and I don't understand how they relate to the specific roles they were in. And this individual, their first job was in 1996. So I have no idea if the things that you accomplished were something that you did 2 decades ago or it's something that you're doing recently. I'm most interested in your current job and your most recent accomplishments. So if I can't, again, if I can't understand your experience, I can't sell you to a hiring manager. So just make it easy for me. That's what I would say. Moving on to cover letters. Now, this does vary by industry, but the field that I'm in development, cover letters are really important, and we do specifically ask for them in every job description. This can be a little bit confusing because since Partners is such a large organization and we're hiring for a variety of jobs, cover letters are not a required document in our applicant tracking system, even though we request them in the job description. So just make sure to read the job description really carefully and know whether or not this is something that they're looking for. Because if you don't, if you submit one without a cover letter, I will go back to you and ask you to write one before I would share your application with the hiring manager. Again, accuracy is critical for the same reasons that it is on your resume. And something else where a cover letter can be really powerful is, especially when you're trying to change industries, is calling out those transferable skills. But the main reason is you need to answer why. Have somebody that you trust read your resume and the job description of the job you're interested in applying for and have them ask you questions. And then these are issues that you can address in your cover letter. Why are you interested in changing fields? Why are you looking to relocate? That's something you could talk about. Any questions that come up where a hiring manager might wonder why you're interested in this specific role is something you can talk about in your cover letter. Oops, sorry. This is an example of a cover letter that a hiring manager said to me was, in their opinion, the ideal cover letter. And I did change this a little bit to, keep the individual's identity anonymous. But why I think they said that is it really clearly, it's specific to the specific position, and that is critical. Do not send me a generic cover letter. I won't even read it. You need to directly address the job responsibilities. Obviously, you guys haven't seen the job description for this role, but in this specific instance, they did use language from the job description. So again, that goes back to using the language of the company. They specifically relate their experience to this job. And then at the end, they reiterate why they're really interested in working for this specific organization in this specific role. And then they make a final pitch for why they feel like they are a strong candidate. Just make it really specific to the role and just sell yourself at every point. Your LinkedIn profile is another tool out there, and it's also going to be something that recruiters and hiring managers are looking at. So, in my opinion, it's best to have a clear professional photo, and I don't mean, you don't need to pay a photographer to take a professional headshot. It just needs to be clean. I don't want to see a phantom arm hanging around your shoulder. If you put up your picture several years ago, go back and look at it, make sure it doesn't look pixelated as technology has advanced. And honestly, you don't really need to include a picture at all. I also like it when I see that a candidate has personalized their URL, and I've included some screenshots here to show you how you can get to that from your profile. And then I would recommend that you include this on your resume because it is something that we're going to go back and look up whether or not you provided it for us. And make sure your LinkedIn profile and your resume are consistent. If the dates don't match, if your titles don't match, I'm going to start to wonder if something's wrong, if you're misrepresenting some information, if maybe there's a gap that you're trying to cover up. Now, those are the tools that you're going to have available to you. And now we're going to talk about how you best expand and utilize your network in order to, get past the robots and make sure you have an opportunity to interact with a human about a job that you're interested in. So when you think about your network, you can think about your sort of, base network. Those are the people you currently work with, anybody you've worked with in a previous position, your friends and family, and then your fellow alumni, whether that's from BU or another institution that you went to either for undergrad or graduate school. But also, you want to think about your future connections, how you can build your network. And I've included some examples of where I think you can best do this. So first, professional associations. These are related to the industry you're in or the industry you want to get in. I know just within fundraising, there are dozens of professional associations related to each business line within a fundraising office, and this is true across every industry. Relatedly, you can attend event and conferences. These are great networking opportunities, great way to meet people that are doing work that you're really interested in. You can attend meetup groups around areas you're interested in. Second tier connections, what I mean by this is if you, using LinkedIn as another example, if you are first degree connection with somebody, that's somebody that you are friends with. If you want to think of it like Facebook, those are your Facebook friends. And then you have second degree connections, and those are people that are friends of friends. So there are people that you have somebody that you could ask to make an introduction, and that can be a really powerful network to build. Also, volunteer opportunities like nonprofit organizations are always looking for board members. So that's an opportunity not only to learn about an organization and give back, but people on boards typically tend to represent a variety of industries. When you do make a new connection, best practice is to follow up with them within 24 hours. If it's just somebody you met, but they're not really in an industry that you're interested in, you can just connect with them on LinkedIn. If they are somebody who in an industry that you're interested in, then you can follow up with them and ask them for coffee, ask them for an informational interview, or ask them to connect them with somebody who you would like to meet. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about LinkedIn. Previously we talked about their profile, but here's how you can make it work for you. And again, going back to building up your network. So recruiters are out there looking for you on LinkedIn. This is LinkedIn's greatest area of business. It's where they're putting most of their energy in building out the product. And so more and more recruiters are using it every day. So think back to that word cloud. What's the language in there that you need to put into your profile in order for recruiters who are keyword searching to be able to find you? Um, I attended a session actually that Jeff put on. It was a panel discussion with recruiters from a variety of industries. And something really interesting that they said there was a recruiter from Shark Ninja who talked about how 45% of their hires, their initial contact came from over social media. And there was another recruiter from Care.com who said that the bulk of their hires came from LinkedIn, Glassdoor, or employee referral. So this is a really powerful tool that you have at your disposal. Another way you can utilize LinkedIn is to engage with people via groups. And LinkedIn recently went through a redesign and groups got kind of buried. So I have a screenshot in here to show you how to find them. There are groups related to every industry, and it's just a really great tool to go in and initiate conversations, respond to conversations. You can start to build rapport with people, and then from there, those are individuals you could go to and ask for an informational conversation. Also, outside of groups, you can also share content and write original content directly into your newsfeed, and this would go to all of your connections. So you have the option to share an article, photo, or update, and you need think of this like Twitter. These are short posts. You're resharing something from another organization or a news article. Or you can write your own article and think of this as like a blog post. You could write a response to an interesting article. If there's something going on in your industry, you can, you know, write a blog post about your opinion about it. You could put in a top 10 list about something. Just this is original content. And as a recruiter, if I go into your profile and I see that you are generating content, to me that demonstrates that you're really passionate about what you do. Obviously, anything you put up here, you want to make sure that it's a really high quality piece because we'll be looking at that as well. Another feature of LinkedIn that I feel like is underutilized is the option to follow individuals. So when you connect with somebody, you send them a request and they have to approve you. Now, if you don't know that person, if you don't know anybody who knows that person, so no one can make an introduction for you, it feels a little hollow to just send them a request to connect. I don't love it when I get a request to connect from somebody that I can't at all figure out why they would want to connect with me or how we know each other. So an option is to follow them. And this means anything that they post, like, share, comment on will show up in your feed. And then you can comment, share, comment back. And that's another way to start building up a rapport with them. And then maybe they start to learn who you are, and you could from there ask to have an informational conversation. So I've now referenced informational interviews multiple times. So what exactly is an informational interview? Why do you want one, and how do you get one? So informational interviews are opportunities for you to learn about a career or a specific company that you're interested in before you apply for a specific job. But it's also an opportunity for that company or that prospective employer to learn about you. This is definitely a two-way exchange of information, and you need to take it seriously like you would if it was an actual interview. You need to show up professionally dressed, you need to be on time, you need to come with a copy of your resume, and you need to do some prep work. You definitely need to be prepared with questions, and you need to know what's going on with the organization. I will go into a little bit of detail in a couple slides about how to prep for an interview, but I do want to say that when you're thinking about what questions to ask for an informational interview, you mostly want to ask questions about the person sitting across from you, not necessarily focusing too much on the company or opportunities within that company. You really want to learn about that individual's career path. You want to know how they got to where they are today, what they like best about their job, what's most challenging about their job. Your role here is mostly to get them to talk and you to listen. Also, when you are requesting an informational interview, it's best if you have someone who can introduce you to this individual via email, if they're not somebody that you have met previously, and you want to make it as convenient for them as possible. So you want to say, I only need 30 minutes of your time, and I'm willing to come to you in person to your office. I wouldn't offer to just have a phone call unless they say they absolutely have no time to meet in person. It's best if you can get a face-to-face meeting. And at the end of an informational interview, you should say to them, thank you so much for your time. And who else do you think I should meet with to learn more about this company or this industry or this type of job? And trying and leave there with a referral. This is an example email that you could send to somebody requesting an informational interview. In this specific instance, I am really interested in learning about how to become an astronaut at NASA. And Sarah and I both know Robert, and so Sarah has said that Robert is the individual I should be reaching out to. I want to come to Robert's office, I guess, at NASA and learn a little bit about his career as an astronaut and how I can follow that same path. So as I said, you should definitely do your prep work before an interview, an informational interview. I also think that you should do your prep work before you even get to a phone screen because other people are going to be very prepared, and you can sort of tell when somebody hasn't done all the prep that they could do when you're talking. As a recruiter, you can tell when you're talking to them on the phone. So make sure that you've really educated yourself about the specific role. You've read the job description in detail. You know about the company and their core business, and you know a little bit about the industry that they're in. You know, Review the company's website. And I think that the two most important parts of a company's website are their homepage and then their news or media or PR section, because that's the information that they are trying to put out that they want the public to know. So it's really great if you can demonstrate that you are educated in that area. And I always suggest that once you review the website, have a couple things in mind that you could authentically and naturally build into a conversation to reference and say, oh, yeah, I saw that on your website. It reflects to me that you are taking this seriously and you've done your homework. Also, you could do a Google News search on this specific company or the specific industry, see if there's something new that's going on. Maybe this is where the news is that the company doesn't want you to know about, but that you should definitely be educated on as well. If possible, review the company's financial filings. I mean, this is if you really want to go the extra step. I always like to do this when I was interviewing for fundraising positions because nonprofit organizations' financial filings are public, their 990s are public, and you can get some detail around how much money they're raising and where they're raising it from. So I thought that was always really powerful knowledge to have going into an interview. And then if you're not familiar with Glassdoor, it's basically Yelp for employees to give reviews of their previous or current employer. You definitely can see extremes in interviews, I mean, in reviews, especially if it's coming from a disgruntled former employee. So take what you see on there with a grain of salt. But it's also a great tool just to educate yourself about the culture of the organization. So now, you've utilized your network to interview. You've utilized you have the best resume and you have gotten to a phone screen. Somebody thinks that you're a quality candidate and they want to learn more about your experience. So this is likely going to be with a recruiter, but depending on the size of the organization, it could be with a hiring manager or somebody else. So this is what I think makes for a successful phone screen. Number one, please make sure that you are in a quiet indoor space with no distractions. I have talked to people who say, "Oh, I'm just getting in my car," and it's very obvious that they're driving and it's rather distracting. Or I've talked to people who sound like they're standing outside in Kansas in the middle of a twister. It's really loud if there's a lot of background noise, and it can make it difficult for me to hear you and to catch everything that you're saying. So just please be somewhere quiet with no distractions. Speak really clearly. Be careful of not talking too fast, which I feel like sometimes people can do over the phone. I hope I'm not doing that too much right now. If somebody asks you a question, silences can be a little awkward on the phone. So buy yourself a little bit of time. Oh, that's a really interesting question. Let me think about that. I do have multiple examples that I could share with you. I think the best one is this. In that amount of time, you should be able to come up with an example that you can share. And be prepared with examples that you think they might ask you. And when I ask you for an example, I'm going to want you to state the problem, your role in it, what the outcome was, and any lessons learned. And lessons learned are really important because nobody's perfect, and we want to make sure that you are learning and growing and open to feedback. That's huge. Do be prepared to discuss salary. We bring that up in every initial conversation because we don't want to waste anybody's time. And I do think that is typical in a lot of larger organizations. Um, Ask questions. But again, if you're talking to the recruiter, they're not the hiring manager. So just keep in mind that you don't want to ask too much about the day-to-day or review processes. And I am going to talk more about questions, do's, and don'ts in a little bit. But just be aware of that. The recruiter has different information than the hiring manager. And again, when you are talking to the recruiter, I tend to have a very casual style, but this is still a professional conversation. So, like, we're not friends. Don't get overly chummy with me. I've had people really let their guard down and be way too casual in what they share with me. And again, this goes back to I have a reputation with the hiring manager that I have to maintain, and I'm only going to bring forward to them the highest quality candidates and the people who I think are going to reflect well on me, frankly. So just make sure to always be highly professional with the recruiter or anybody else you're talking to. And I don't always get a thank you email from a phone screen. I don't necessarily expect it, but it's always nice, and I do share it with the hiring manager. And especially, again, this might be industry specific, but in development, we are really, really, really big on the follow up and the thank yous. I mean, our whole business is the business of relationships. It's donor relationships, and the thank you is really important. So I do appreciate that. So my slide about interviews is really small, but this is because A lot of the prep work you've done has already been covered in your informational interview and your phone screen prep. So these are just a few tips that wouldn't have come up previously that you should specifically adhere to when you are going in for an in-person interview. And some other things to consider when I say be confident, this goes from the second you walk through the door. So, have a firm handshake. Make sure you speak clearly. Don't rush. Make really good eye contact. And especially if you are going into a panel interview where multiple people are going to be asking you questions at once, make sure you're going around and giving eye contact to everybody. And make sure you're not fidgeting with anything. So just that's what I mean when I say be confident. So here's the questions that I think, in my opinion, are the do's and don'ts. So on the left, these are the questions I think you should definitely ask during an interview. And the ones on the right are the ones I think you should avoid. And I feel like if there was a controversial slide in my presentation, I think this one might be it. So let me say more about why I put these questions where I did. The questions on the left are really thoughtful and they are focused on the needs of the company. So, what I have here is what do you think will be the biggest challenge for someone coming into this position? How would you define success for this role after the first 6 months? What is going to be the top priority for the person coming into this position? And how would you describe the culture of this company? And the last question, I also took this from that panel session that Jeff put on that I referenced previously, and all the recruiters on that panel said that their favorite question that they get from candidates is, "What do you love about your job?" So I think that, if you take one thing away from this, definitely write that down. Now, on the other side of the slide are the ones I think you should avoid, and I specifically mean I think you should avoid them during an interview. Some of these questions would be appropriate to ask at an offer stage, but not during initial interview, because the questions on the right-hand side, these are focused on the needs of the candidate and not the needs of the job. And sometimes when I get questions like this, I wonder, well, are you really even interested in this job? Or are you just thinking about this and about how it will get you your next job? Or are you just interested in the perks of this position? So let's go through these real quick. So when somebody asks me about opportunities for advancement, or they focus too much on kind of where they would go next after this job, maybe there are some industries where people are, they would appreciate this really forward thinking, line of questioning. And it's not that we don't want people who are career minded, we absolutely do, but we want to find somebody who's a right fit for this role right now. And we want to avoid anybody who we feel like would only be using a position as a stepping stone to get to their next place. So if you want to know more about, professional development or career growth, just be careful about how you word that question and, the impression that it might give to the person on the receiving end. Uh, the other ones on this slide about what does a typical day look like for someone in this role, um, sometimes it makes me think that, they don't really understand what's in the job description or, they're not really familiar with all the responsibilities that are laid out. I think there might be the right way to ask this question, but it raises more questions than it answers, really. And then the other three, how attractive is the benefits package? What is the annual review process? And how, can I work from home? These are definitely not questions that you should ask during an interview. Uh, if you're only applying to the job because you're looking for a position with better benefits, we want somebody who's really passionate about this specific role. If you're overly worried about what the review process is like, it makes me wonder if are you not open to feedback? Do you consistently get negative reviews? Like why are you so worried about this? And then can I work from home? If like I feel like that might be controversial to put on the do not ask list, but again, I think you can ask this when you get to an offer phase. And unless the job specifically states that remote work is an option, I think you should assume that it's not. And if it's not, are you still interested in this job? If you absolutely know that you need to work remote, then you should probably only be looking for jobs that explicitly state that. Now I have two examples of follow-up. An email is absolutely required, thank you, after you have an interview. And it's a nice touch if you want to send a handwritten thank you note. In again, this varies by industry. In development, we love the handwritten thank you note. Every job that I've had, I've sent a handwritten thank you note, and once I've gotten the job offer, the hiring manager always compliments me and says, that was such a nice touch. It really set you apart. We really appreciated it. So again, varies industry by industry, but an email thank you after an interview is mandatory no matter what industry you are in. That was also something that came up on that panel event that I attended where there were people from um, pharma, from tech companies, from consumer products. It's absolutely necessary. So here's an example of a thank you note that you could send. You want to say, thank you for the time, reference something specific that you talk about, state again why you feel like you're a strong candidate for this position, and then say that you're looking forward to hearing from them regarding next steps. And then if you haven't heard anything back in a couple of weeks, I think that is the right time to follow up and check in. You want to demonstrate to them that you are still engaged in this specific position. And I think it's always best to include something that's going on, either specifically with the company or in the industry in general, not just emailing them saying, hey, am I going to get that job? So here's an example where I am interested. I came in and interviewed for the position of assistant to the regional manager at Dunder Mifflin Paper Company, and I'm following up on my interview that I had with the regional manager, Michael Scott. And I did see that Dunder Mifflin is set to be acquired by Sabre, and that's an interesting vertical integration between a printer company and a paper company. I'm still really excited about this opportunity. I'm sure that, with this acquisition, there might be some changes in their staffing structure, but I'd really love to be a part of your team. And that's all I have for you. So now I'm happy to take any questions that you guys have.
Molly, thank you so much for a great presentation. You covered a lot of territory in just about 40 minutes. Each one of those slides, I think, could have been its own webinar. So I really appreciate you taking the time. I also have to say, I think you nailed it with the advice about questions to ask and not ask in an interview. I think there's really bad information out there, but I couldn't agree with you more about postponing any questions about your own personal needs until the offer stage. So we have some great questions from the audience already. So Molly, if you're good to go, I'll just start reading them back to you.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, perfect. And just so folks know, Molly and I are experiencing a bit of delay in our communication with each other on here. So if you hear a little brief pause, that's why. So Kelly asked a really great nuts and bolts question about resumes and cover letters and the applicant tracking system. Do lines on a resume or in a cover letter skew fonts in the applicant tracking system?
That is a really great question. So at least how our system is set up, and I can't speak to all of them, is that you you submit your resume in plain text, but you also upload an attachment. So the version that I look at is your uploaded attachment through either a Word doc or a PDF. So that should look exactly how it looks to you when you look at it on your screen. So I'm not looking at the plain text version. So lines, yes, it might look ugly in there, but I'm only seeing your, beautiful finished product.
Carolyn has asked a really great question here. She's interested in going to conferences in a new field, but it seems awkward to go by myself when I have no job in the field and cannot join a professional association until she has a job. So, long story short, any tips for not being weird at a conference?
That is great. I feel like I sometimes get weird at conferences even when I am in the field. Well, actually, just to give you an example from personal experience, before I came to Partners, I was working in higher ed, and there's an organization called CASE, which stands for the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education. So it's individuals who work in alumni relations, fundraising, and marketing for higher education institutions. I attended the conference as as an employee of Partners, and I got a lot of, why are you here? You work for a healthcare company. So it was a little awkward, but I think you just have to own it and just tell your story. Say, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm interested in. And honestly, I feel like that it's a really unique opportunity that you'd be in because you'd be coming into something new. So that's a great way to say to people, I really want to learn about what you do. Would you be willing to have a conversation with me? Because the reality, Carolyn, is that people love to talk about themselves. So I bet you could really easily get a lot of people who'd be really happy to have informational conversations with you. So I think you just need to be really transparent and own it and go there and just try and meet as many people as you can and get their business cards and then follow up with them afterwards and ask them to have an informational conversation with you.
I think that's great advice, Molly. I'm going to combine questions from Nick and Abby. Can you speak briefly a couple tips for people who are either transitioning back into a particular field or just back into the workforce in general after a long break? So, folks who have taken time off to raise a family or, were out for a long time with an illness. Do you have any quick tips for those folks about how to represent that on a resume or on a LinkedIn profile?
Oh, I saw somebody's LinkedIn profile. They actually put their job title in as like chief bottle washer. I don't know. They made up some really cute title that obviously reflected, the time that they were staying home with their family, and I love that. Or, it was like president of household activities or something. I mean, I feel like you can get creative about how you would put that, at least on a LinkedIn profile. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of people out there who have, gaps in the resume for whatever reason. And I think when you're coming back into the work field, just be really transparent about that. But also keep in mind that you may not then be going back in at the same level that you left. So if you can be a little bit flexible, that's always helpful. And, anything you can do, to gain experience, while you're job searching. Uh, Again, that would go back to like look into volunteer opportunities. Um, those are things that I think would help, develop your professional skills while you're looking to get back into it. But I think in general, just be really transparent about it. Just be really upfront about it, and I'm sure you'll find the right opportunity.
Got just a handful of great questions here from everyone. Thanks for typing in. Liz has asked, so basically, should your LinkedIn profile match your specific resumes tailored to a company or a job that you're applying for? And what do you do with your LinkedIn profile if you're applying to more than one job in more than one industry?
Hmm, that's a really great question. Um, Yeah, I would say that's tricky, right? If you are looking into multiple industries, you wouldn't then want to make your LinkedIn too narrow. Um, something, yeah, that's a really good question. Any way that you could kind of hybrid the different industries that you're interested in, that would be probably a good technique. Um, make sure you're kind of touching on a variety of keywords that would be relevant to the different industries that you're interested in. I mean, depending on, I'll see people who have either at the top of their resume or the top of their LinkedIn profile, they have that kind of summary about themselves at the top, and they'll say, I'm interested in X, Y, and Z, and as long as X, Y, and Z, like I could get why you were interested in those three different fields, like development and marketing there's a lot related there. But if you're looking at, development and maybe I want to be a, astronaut, those are really different. And then that would maybe send up to a red flag to me that you don't really know what you want to do. So I think you can be transparent that you're interested in multiple industries, at least in your LinkedIn profile. If you are submitting a resume to a specific job, then I wouldn't mention those other industries that you're interested in. I do get that too sometimes, where somebody will send me a resume and at the top it'll say, looking for positions in, development and something else and something else and something else. And I'm like, seriously, you couldn't just delete those other things before you sent this to me? But yeah, at least in your public profile, I think it's okay to be a bit more inclusive about all the different areas that are appealing to you.
Got another great question from Carolyn. Can you give any tips for building a LinkedIn profile in a way that makes her attractive to a new field without tipping off her current colleagues that she's looking for other work?
Oh my God, that's such a great question. I always wonder because, I have my title on LinkedIn is, I don't have senior development officer staff development. I have it as recruiter. And I always wonder if people are gonna not connect with me because they don't want to see that they've like connected with a recruiter. Um, yeah, that's a really great question. Well, I would say, how much do you really think your coworkers are paying attention to your LinkedIn profile? I mean, I don't know. Maybe they are, but I think, you can go on there and maybe when you're talking about your current job, you can think about what responsibilities and skills you have that would be most transferable to the industry that you're interested in, and those can be the ones that you play up on your LinkedIn profile, because that is then still related to your current role, but it would be an indication to people in the field, in the industry that you're looking to, that you do have those transferable skills. I mean, also there are more kind of subtle ways to signal that you're interested in that. Like, I can see what groups you've joined. So that would be another thing. Maybe join some groups related to the industry that you're interested in. Um, that wouldn't be something that necessarily would, be announced on your newsfeed. Oh, you can also turn off um, the like updates that go out whenever you make an update to your LinkedIn profile, because that's something LinkedIn does. If you make an update, it can like send an e-blast to everybody that you're connected to. So you would definitely want to turn that off before you make any edits, um, especially if you don't want to tip anybody off. But I think about your transferable skills to highlight, utilize your groups. Um, yeah, I think those, if you're really worried about not signaling that you're actively looking, those might be the best courses to take.
Got a really good question from Shay, specifically for you, Molly, in the industry that you work in and the organization. Shay's wondering, would it be very difficult for someone trying to transition into the nonprofit sector if they don't have a professional degree related to nonprofit management or fundraising, or a business degree?
Absolutely not. It is a nice to have. It is not a must have. I mean, we do have some positions where they say master's degree preferred, but even then, it doesn't necessarily have to be a master's degree in nonprofit management. I mean, I chose this, I'll put in my, well, you all are all alumni, but I can put in my little BU plug here, that I loved my MBA experience. I mean, it was amazing. I had the opportunity to go full time. I really loved it. The public and nonprofit management program was incredible. Loved every second of it. Would recommend it to anybody. Would absolutely do it again. That being said, I don't know how much it actually helped me get any of my jobs. I think that it looks nice on a resume, but uh, it's definitely not necessary. I think if you were looking for a career in, nonprofits in general or fundraising, like you should find a master's degree program that speaks to you and appeals to you and is right for you. Um, but it definitely is not something that is going to make or break you getting a job. Especially, I think, within nonprofit organizations, your experience is the most important thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I myself have quite a long history of working in nonprofits and education, and I absolutely agree with you there, Molly. Good question from Karen. What's your view on professional resume writers? Is it worth it to hire somebody to take care of writing your resume or even your LinkedIn profile?
That's really interesting. Um, I I mean, sitting where I sit, I would say, like, I'm assuming that what you are sending to me is a reflection of your quality of work. And that if we were to find out that if you got a job, the quality that you were producing for us was significantly different than what was reflected through your resume or your cover letter, I mean, I don't know, you might not last through your 90-day trial period. Um, I mean, I have no idea how much that's happening, how much what I'm receiving is being professionally written. I don't have statistics on, how prevalent that is throughout, different industries. Um, I think that, I mean, your experience best. You know what job you're applying for. I don't think that creating a LinkedIn profile or a resume is that hard. So I I don't know how much of a good use it is of your resources to pay somebody to do that. I don't think that they're necessary. Um, yeah, that's just my opinion about it.
Um, Great question from, actually, I just want to mention to folks briefly, we've got really, really great questions here. Um, we're not going to get to all of them today, but I want to make sure that you know we have recorded all of our webinars. And a lot of the questions that you're asking about things, we've done actually previous webinars before, and the one that we're doing today will be included in our on-demand webinar library. So I'm pulling out a little note here so that people can see where you can find these. If you go to our website at bu.edu/alumni/careers, definitely make sure that that you take a look at that. Nick, you've asked a specific question that we had a great webinar on not too long ago. Nick's question, Molly, is how can I overcome the perception that I'm too old to be an ideal candidate?
Hi, sorry, you were breaking up. Did you say how can you overcome being too old to be an ideal candidate, or was there something I missed in there?
Sorry about that. Yes, the question from Nick was, how do I combat the idea that I'm too old, that I'm perceived to be too old to be a successful candidate for an open position?
Um, I guess it depends on the position that you're applying for. I mean, I talk to people at all stages of their careers because there are people who've had full careers in different industries, mostly around like corporate sales. We get a lot of people who have come from a corporate sales background who are interested in transitioning into fundraising, specifically, being a frontline, a gift officer where you're out soliciting donations because it's a similar. skill set. So, I will, if somebody who's had a successful career and so then is likely, to be older, comes to me and wants to know about positions, I will say that if sometimes they'll say to me, I want to change careers, so I'm willing to take a more junior position. But that always gives me pause because, like, are you really, what level of junior position? Not only, our junior positions are going to be really administrative, and you obviously have a stronger skill set. That's not going to be utilizing you, and I would worry that you're going to get frustrated, you're going to get bored, you're not going to be challenged. And also, your salary requirements are going to be something that I worry about. Our more entry level junior positions are not going to come close to what you were making previously. So that's always a challenge. So I think, if you are senior in your career, then it's thinking about the right level for you. And then I would think that your age shouldn't be an issue. I mean, in fact, if your age comes with your seniority, and we also have positions where we're looking for really senior people who have a lot of experience, and we wouldn't want to, we'd probably wouldn't want to hire somebody too young who didn't have enough experience for that particular role. So I would say as long as you're looking into the role that's really the right fit for your experience level, um, then I mean, then I don't see why anybody would be discriminating you against your age. I mean, it's also illegal to do that. So I think just looking for the right fit is the most important thing.
Nick, I would also add, and Molly, if you don't mind, I want to build off of what you just said, but a
Yeah.
huge piece of staying competitive as an older candidate is doing all the things that Molly has listed here today. This was a great overview about how to be current in a job search and how to do things that are generally accepted activities and actions now. The other thing that I would want to add, and this is another plug for an upcoming event that we're doing, is if you're concerned about your appearance or looking or seeming older, a great way to combat that in an interview setting is by making sure that you've got an updated attire and wardrobe. We're actually going to be hosting a great webinar on March 27th called How to Dress for the Job You Want. We have an alumna fashion entrepreneur who's going to be covering how to look current in your workplace attire, and she'll, I think, definitely have some great tips for doing that in an interview setting. Um, Molly, we're running right up against the hour here. I'm going to take this one last question from Christina. It's a really interesting one. Talking about salary is really complicated, and you mentioned that it's something that you approach early on with all of your candidates. So Christina asks, when you say to be prepared to discuss salary, what things do you recommend taking into consideration? Christina's afraid of going too high with what she's looking for, overshooting and then being turned down, but she also doesn't want to sell herself short. So when a recruiter or a hiring manager asks you what your salary requirements are, how do you recommend responding to that question?
That's a great question. Um, So for those of you, well, in Massachusetts, they recently passed a law, I think that goes into effect next year, where employers will no longer be able to ask you what your current salary is. So that's just something to keep in mind. But they can still ask what your required salary is. Basically, the logic behind that is that what somebody's currently making is essentially irrelevant for the job that they're applying for. And that people should be compensated for the job that they're doing, not for the job that they previously did. So I would say you do need to be prepared. You should think about, what, I mean, you should think about your current compensation as maybe a benchmark. There are services or tools that you can look out there to get some sense of what salaries are in different industries. Sometimes you have to pay for that information. But I don't think that it hurts to aim high. as long as it's not some completely overinflated number. So how we handle it is I will ask an employee or a prospect what their salary requirements are. Most people will just tell me, which is great. And if they don't, and people really push me and or because if anybody's taken a negotiation class, they're always told not to be the one to put out the first number. But if they don't, I'll say, well, here's the range for this position, and is that something that is still you're interested in? And our ranges are firm. So if you're thinking, oh, that's low, but hopefully I can negotiate high, like not gonna happen. So that is my advice to you. But also, if you're a strong candidate and you came to us and you said, this is my salary requirement, and it was above our range, then I would just come back to you and I wouldn't say, oh, well, too bad, like that's not what we're offering here, like goodbye. I would say, well, here's the range, like are you still interested in that? And then you could evaluate whether or not. So I would say can't hurt to go a little high, but be prepared for them to come back to you and saying that that might not be a reality for that specific situation. And most hiring managers will say to me, I want to talk to every candidate regardless of their salary requirements. So even if somebody is high, if they're really strong, we'll still talk to them, see if there's any wiggle room. Sometimes there is a chance that a position will be elevated to a higher level in order to meet their compensation requirements if they really are the person that we want to hire. So, aim high.
So we're coming up against the hour here. People who've typed in great questions: Tony, Shu, Kathy, Tess, Jerry, Sammy. Thank you for your great questions. Molly, what's the best way for people to follow up with you if they would like to continue the conversation with you? Or we also have people wondering if they can get their hands on a copy of your slide deck.
Sure, yeah. My email's on the screen, mrichter1@partners.org, or connect with me on LinkedIn. I have my personalized URL here, so you can shoot me a message either way, and I'd be happy to follow up with you.
Molly, we have a lot of people who are typing in just thank you and great job into the Q&A box here. So I agree with them. You did a terrific job today covering a lot of material in just an hour. So on behalf of all of Boston University, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, everyone.
I also want to thank all of our guests for coming today. Specifically want to thank those of you who've donated to BU in the past. We couldn't put on programs like this without your support. We've got an incredible lineup of events taking place throughout the rest of March. As I mentioned, it's Alumni Career Weeks 2017. I mentioned the webinar that we've got coming up on how to dress for the job you want. I encourage everybody to visit our website at bu.edu/alumni/careerweeks to sign up for those events now. And as always, if you or any BU alumni you know would be interested in presenting a professional development webinar like this for the BU community, I'll ask that you please contact me at the Alumni Relations Office, or you can reach me by email at jtmurphy@bu.edu. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Have a great day or a great evening, wherever you might be.